Hello and welcome to episode 7 of this series. In this episode, I'm going to show you another technique of establishing communication between components using, a dynamic kind of approach. So basically, throughout the previous episodes, we have seen different methods, different approaches of components communicating with one another. So I think the most fundamental technique is to use input properties. Then you've got output properties to notify your parent component. Then you've got like shared services, right, with subjects and behavior subjects and so on. This episode is going to be about dynamic components, and I'm going to tell you what dynamic components mean. And we are going to implement a new requirement, a new feature in our application using this technique. So let's get started. So the goal of this episode is to create and interact with components dynamically. And as I said, I'm going to tell you what dynamic means in this context using two very important concepts, ComponentRef and ViewContainerRef. And we're going to see these in action. And we're going to send and receive data from these components using direct references or events. In order to drive home the point, I have come up with a simple scenario in our application. So suppose a user wants to reserve or book seats for a group of passengers on a flight, a booking, right? So basically you've got flights, you've got bookings. Now the user wants to add some passengers to that booking, and the number of passengers is not known. The number of passengers is not known upfront. We do not know how many passenger forms we need to render. So basically, first of all, we need a form, right, to collect the data, the information of a passenger, like full name, passport number, and so on. But the requirement that we need to keep in mind, the thing that we need to keep in mind is that we do not know upfront how many passengers we need to, render, how many passenger forms we need to render, how many, let's say, passengers the user wants to add to that booking. So we need to be able to add passenger forms dynamically. So basically, we're going to allow the user to click like on a button, and then a new passenger form kind of appears. And then the user can enter the full name, passport number, and whatever of that passenger, and then they can, add another passenger and so on. So, based on what I just described, first off, we kind of know that we need a component to collect the data, the information of a passenger. So we're going to create a passenger form component. But again, we do not know how many instances of this component we need to render, because we want to allow the user to be able to enter as many passengers as they want. So we need to dynamically allow the user to add or remove passenger form components. This is the meaning of dynamic. You are not behaving statically, right? You do not, let's say, hard code number 3, 5, 6 as the number of passengers. You want to allow the user to dynamically add as many instances as they want of this passenger form component. And then, of course, using this component, we will be able to get data from the user, and then we can do whatever we want with that data. For example, we can log it, we can add it to a booking, and whatever we want, basically. So let's go ahead and do the things that we need to do. First off, we're going to create this passenger form component. And this component, the passenger form component, is going to be a simple form component to collect the data of a component, of a passenger. So basically, it has this input property called index, right? And we are telling TypeScript using this non-null assertion operator. We're telling TypeScript not to worry about the fact that we haven't initialized this index here, because the parent component is going to do that, the parent component of this passenger form component. And then we've got this output, property. The output property is called form change, and it's going to emit, an object, an event, let's say, to the parent component containing this object. Take a look at the properties. You've got index, you've got full name, you've got passport. So then we've got two local properties, full name and passport number. Then we've got this function. This emit changes is going to emit, using this form changed is going to, emit an event to the parent component with this object. Three properties: index, full name, passport. Index is going to take its value from the, input parameter, input property. Full name and passport are going to be populated using these two local, properties. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and kind of implement this component. So I have already created a new branch for this, video, and I am going to create my component. So my component is created. I am going to navigate to it. Passenger form component. This is my passenger form component, and I am going to write my code here. If you have watched the previous episodes, you know what input, output, what these different decorators do. But if you haven't, again, I highly recommend that you do, but I want to, talk about them here as well. But of course, in not in full detail. If you want more detail, just refer to, I think, episode 2 or 1 to kind of understand what input does. So I have imported, my imports, added my imports. Now the template. So this is the template of this component. It's very easy. Basically, it's like a form. First, we're going to render the index that we get from our parent component. We're going to first increment it by 1. We're going to render it here. Then we have two input statements, two input elements. So they're using two-way data binding to, bind to the two properties in our TypeScript file, full name and passport number. And we're handling the input events. So basically, this means that on every keystroke, the emit changes event that we just discussed is going to get called. And that means that the parent component will receive that object containing the passport, the full name, and the index of the passenger. Again, whenever you enter a new character or when you delete a character from those inputs on every keystroke, as I said. So this is kind of important to remember. So let's go ahead and write the code for the template. So passenger form HTML. This is my passenger form, and I am going to write the code. Again, as we're using ng model for two-way data binding, we need to import forms module in our TypeScript file. Remember, whenever you're doing two-way data binding using ng model, when you're doing two-way data binding, you need to import the forms module here because we're using, standalone components. We need to import forms module. So the purpose of passenger form component, as I said, it is a reusable dynamic angular form component for collecting the information of a passenger, basically name, form, passport number, and of course index. And it's going to emit, changes to the parent component as the user types. So on keystrokes, it provides two inputs, full name and passport number. It notifies the parent component of any changes in real time, including the passenger's index. And then different parts, you can pause the video and study these at yourself if you want. But basically, we have this input property. The parent component is responsible for providing a value. A number, different numbers are going to be provided by the parent component, and you're going to see the parent component in a minute. And then this allows identifying which passenger the form belongs to, passenger number 1, 2, 3, and so on, because we want to render multiple instances of this component. And it is used in the UI to kind of show what passenger this instance of this component represents. Then we've got this output. So this output is going to emit an object including the index, the full name, and passport to the parent component as the user types, right? So this allows our communication. This allows for our communication with our parent component. So the parent component is going to kind of maintain a full list of passenger details, and we're going to see that in action. So two fields, full name, passport number, two-way data binding using ng model, and then any change also emit changes as the user types. This method is going to get called, and the parent component is going to be notified. This is the method, right? This is the object that we're going to send to our parent component. So emits the latest form values and index to the parent, triggered on every input change because we are handling the input event of these input elements. Yeah, the template is also easy. Is gonna render the name, the word passenger with a number, two input boxes, two-way data binding, and then whenever you type something, those updated values are gonna get sent to your parent component. Now we want to create the host component. So we're gonna have a host component to render these form components dynamically, again, because we do not know upfront how many form components, how many passenger form components we want to render. So we are going to create this passenger form component, and this component is a little bit, kind of, let's say, more complex than the passenger form. But no worries, we're gonna explore everything in full detail. So first we will update, after we create this component, we will update the template, and we are going to add a template reference variable called container to the template, and we are going to access that from our TypeScript file. So take a look at the component, the template file for the component. We've got this h3 tag, we've got two buttons. These buttons are gonna kind of invoke two methods from our template, from our TypeScript file: add passenger, log passenger data, and then we've got this section, ng template, and then we have added a reference variable to this ng template so that we can access this from our TypeScript file. And I'm gonna tell you exactly what this ng template is. So what is ng template? Ng template is a directive, a structural directive in Angular, and it kind of defines, I think we have already seen another example of ng template in previous episodes. So it defines a block of HTML that is not rendered to the DOM unless you tell it to render. So when you put something here, it means that it is not going to render automatically, as opposed to these, for example, elements. But you can instruct it to get rendered. Where, for example, from your TypeScript file. So it's like a placeholder for some content. Think of it as a template definition. Angular won't render it immediately. ng template won't get rendered automatically. You need to manually insert it using tools like, for example, ViewContainerRef or TemplateRef, or use it in conjunction with structural directives like ngF or ng4. We have used ng template, I think, in previous episodes, in conjunction with structural directives like ngF. Yeah, I can also go ahead and show you here. If I come here and search for ng template, I guess I have it somewhere. Yeah, flight detail component. So as you can see here, we have already used this ng template. But in this case, we are, this will not get rendered automatically, but we are going to render it here. So if there are no flights, just go ahead and render this ng template, and we've got like a reference variable that we have used here. But in this episode, we are going to see another use case of ng template. So what is container? You see container here? So this is a reference variable. So it is called a template reference variable, to be precise. It means that you are, kind of attaching a name or a reference variable to this ng template, and then you will be able to access this or refer to this using this container, ID, if you will. So this defines a variable called container that refers to this specific ng template, and then you can access this template from your component code using ViewChild. You remember ViewChild from, I guess, episode 5 was it, I guess. So you remember ViewChild, right? In that episode, we saw ViewChart and we used ViewChart in a different context. But in this case, in this episode, ViewChart as a directive is going to allow us to get access to this template reference variable container and then to do something with it. And I'm going to show you what that means. So let's do something. Let's first create this passenger manager component and update the template file. So I'm going to get you to my code, and then I am going to create this passenger manager component, which is going to be our like host and manager component HTML. I'm going to get rid of this code, and then I am going to write the code for the template. Of course, these functions are not defined yet, but we are going to define them. So yeah, update the TypeScript file now. The TypeScript is a little bit, let's say complex, but bear with me. I'm going to explain everything in full detail. So we are going to start with things that we already know. So for example, inside of this function add passenger, we are going to access the component refs, which is something that we have defined here, right? And we are going to get the length. Basically, we are constructing, we are kind of building the index that we want to kind of use as the index of our passenger. So then we are, as you can see, creating a component. The component that we want to create is the passenger form component. The passenger form component requires an index as an input. You remember that, right? So we are passing that index here. We have created the index here, and we are passing that index to the input property of this instance of the passenger form component. And the passenger form component emits an event containing the full name, passport number, and the index of that specific passenger. So we are going to use this component ref, the current instance, and then we are going to listen to this form changed event. We're going to subscribe to it. We're going to receive some data. We're going to do this with that. Do this with this data that we receive. There is this map that I'm going to show you. We have defined that map here in this component, and we are going to add a new data to that map using the index that the child component has sent to this parent component and the full name and the passport number of that passenger. And then we're going to push that component ref to the component refs array that we've got. So this is the component ref that we defined here. It's an instance of the passenger form component. So other things, we are using ViewChart, using that template reference variable to get access to that ng template section. And then we are creating this array, component ref. It is of type passenger form component. This kind of maintains an array of this passenger form component because, as I said, we will have multiple instances of this form rendered. And this host component is going to maintain an array to kind of keep track of the number of instances of this component that are shown up to this point. Then we've got this map. So basically, a map in TypeScript allows you to kind of maintain a list of items, each associated with a number or a key in this case. So the key of our map is a number, which is the index of that passenger form. And then the value is an object of full name and passport. So let me do something. I'm going to talk about these in more detail, by the way. I have explained everything in full detail here. So no worries. We're going to understand every single thing. But before we do that, let's go ahead and add the code to the passenger manager component TypeScript file. So manager TypeScript file. And then we are going to come back to the notes and explain everything. So let me write the code here. I think the important thing is to know how things are going to, let's say, wire up, how things are going to, be working with one another. We've got two components, right? And we want to render multiple instances of that passenger form component dynamically. When I say dynamically, again, it means I do not know upfront how many passengers the user wants to add to that booking. So we want to allow the user to add as many instances of passenger form component as they want. And of course, from the template, we have two methods, two functions to kind of, invoke, to get invoked using those buttons. So I need to import a couple of things here. The component, of course, the component ref, the view child is going to get imported, and that's it. Now, we are going to go through every single line of code in this component because this is the first time we're seeing this. I think you've noticed that the first time I introduce something, I'm going to explain it in full detail. But when I come across the same concept again in, I don't know, like next episode, I am going to explain it, but I'm going to, explain it briefly. But the first time I come across a topic, I'm going to explain it in full detail. So we need to, understand every single thing in this passenger manager component. So what does passenger manager component do? This Angular code defines a dynamic component manager called passenger manager component. It dynamically adds multiple passenger forms, the component that we just defined, passenger form component, to the view at runtime, and collects each form data in a centralized map. So the map, as I showed you, the key is a number. The value is an object containing the full name and the passport number of the user or the passenger. In other words, it does the following. It renders multiple instances of a child form component called passenger form component dynamically at runtime, and it tracks each form's data in real time as the user types, and it allows you to add new passengers dynamically and log all of those passengers to the console. Of course, in a real application, you can do whatever you want with the data, but in this case, we're going to take things simple. We're going to log things to the console. So first, the imports. So we're importing a bunch of things. So the view child and ViewContainerRef, these two, these are used to insert components dynamically into the DOM. Then you've got component ref. So this is used to track individual component instances and interact with them because we have multiple instances of the passenger form component. Using component ref, you can interact with each instance separately. Then you've got after view init. This is a lifecycle hook to manipulate the view after it's initialized. Now, the key fields and decorators. Let's talk about the first line of code. So view child container, read view container ref, container ref. I'm talking about this line of code. I want to understand this. So this grabs a reference to the ng template we defined in the HTML file of this component. So we added this template reference variable container. We're using this template reference variable. So we are, getting access to that ng template, and ViewContainerRef, this allows you to dynamically add components to that placeholder. So in this case, the ng template is like a placeholder where we are going to add our instances of the passenger form component. We need access to that placeholder to be able to add our instances of the passenger form component to it. Then we've got this array. So we've got an array of component ref of this type, the component. It's an array. We're capturing it inside of a private field or private variable called component refs. So this is a list that maintains all of the instances of the passenger form component currently on our host component. So it's useful for managing or destroying them if they're no longer needed. Then you've got this map. So the map is going to, maintain multiple instances of this object, each associated with a number. So a map where the key is the index of the passenger form and the value is the passenger data from that form. So this ensures that each passenger's data is stored in one place. Now, the next part is ng after ViewInit, where we are calling the add passenger. So this add the first passenger form by default. So as soon as the view is ready, one passenger form will be added automatically, because when the user wants to create a booking, of course, they have to at least add one passenger to that booking. Then we've got the add passenger method. So take a look at the code again. Inside of this ng after ViewInit, we're using this function, and this is the function I'm talking about. Let's now talk about the code here. The code is kind of important. This code, what it is doing basically is that it is adding one new instance of the passenger form component to our host component, which is this component, and then it's going to push it after collecting its data. It's going to push it to that map that we just talked about. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So first off, inside of this method, we want to calculate the new passenger index. Dynamically create a new passenger form component and insert it into the container, the ng template, and then it passes the index to the new component so it knows which passenger it is. You remember the passenger form component, right? The passenger form component requires an input property called index. So here, using this create component, we are going to calculate this new instance, this new index, and then pass it to that input property of this new instance of the passenger form component. The name of the property is index. The component ref contains a reference to this new instance of this component, and we can access that input parameter or input property using the name of these const, and then using the instance property, and then using the name of the input property. So this is the code. This is the next part. The next part is doing this. So it's going to subscribe to the form changed event. When the user types into the form, this keeps the passenger data map updated with the latest info. So we have this map. The map, the key for that map is a number, in this case the index, that the child component has sent to us. And the value is the full name and the passport number of that passenger that the child component has collected. So we are going to subscribe to the form changed event of that instance of the passenger form component. We're going to subscribe to it, and whenever that form changed event is invoked, we are going to collect the data and do something with it. And that something means that we are going to add a new entry to our map with this index and this two properties. Then we've got the log passenger data, which is simply going to take the map and convert the map values to an array and logs them in a table using console.table. So it is again useful to see this in action, but of course in a real application you can push this data to your backend API. Now the next thing to do is to add this host component to your app component. So app passenger manager is going to be added to our app component. So let's do this. I'm going to go to my app component. We already have the notification. The router outlet is going to be there for now because I want to talk about routing in future episodes. But what I need to do now is to add my passenger manager here. And of course, we need to import this in our app component TS. So passenger manager component. Now the way to test this is also very interesting. When you want to create a booking, as I said, one passenger is mandatory. So a booking needs at least one passenger. So when you want to add a booking, one passenger form will be created automatically. But you can add new passenger forms dynamically to enter the values of new passengers. And then you can, type the details of that passenger. And then, of course, you can log the data, the details of those passengers to the console. So let me go ahead and do something. Let me go to inspect. And then I am going to have my console here. And then this is what I am going to do. These are the different bookings that I've got, right? So I can go ahead and create, let's say a booking for a couple of passengers. So I am going to do something. For example, I am going to click a flight, see the details of a flight, and then I can book, a passenger on that flight using the approach that we implemented in previous episodes. But the thing that we want to test right now is to be able to add multiple passengers to that booking. So this is the group passenger booking. So by default, one passenger is mandatory, as I said, but you're not limited to that. You can add as many passenger forms as you want. You see the index getting updated? This index is calculated each time you want to add an instance of the passenger form component. This index is calculated by the parent component, and it is passed to that instance of the passenger form component, and that passenger form component is going to receive this input property from the parent, and it's going to render it here. Now let me go ahead and add some names here. So some names and some passport numbers, some random data. Now I can go ahead and add a new passenger if I want, or I can log passenger data. Again, remember, using the passenger form, whenever you enter some value here in these two input boxes, those values are automatically, at each keystroke, automatically are pushed to the parent component, which in this case is the manager component group. The passenger, what was the name? The passenger manager thing. What was the name of that component? Yes, passenger manager component. So this is the host. The host is going to receive these. Now, if I log passenger data, I can see that I've got 4 passengers. So these are the indexes, the full names, and the passport numbers. These are coming from the passenger manager component. So passenger manager component log data. The name of that function was log data. It is going to convert the values inside of that map to an array, and it's going to print that array to the console. So this is the way you can again establish another form of communication between a host and some dynamically rendered child components. We are basically rendering multiple instances of our passenger form component, each time calculating the index, passing the index as the input property of that instance of the passenger form component, at the same time subscribing to the form changed event of that instance of the passenger form component. And when that form changed event is invoked or raised, we are going to add the data to our passenger data map, to our map of the map containing the indexes and the full name and passport number of the passengers. And then of course, we will push that instance of that component to the array, which is holding, as you can see here, which is holding all of our references, all of our instances to the passenger form component. So this component refs, again, is an array containing all of the instances that we have of the, the instances of the passenger form component that we have. And at first, when the host component, which is this component, is rendered, we are going to call this add passenger by default because we at least need one passenger for a booking. And then of course, we are allowing the user to call this add passenger as well using the function that we've got on our, let me close out this one. Using the button that we've got here, we are allowing the user to call that add passenger as many times as they want so that they can get new instances of passenger form component rendered to the output. And again, where are they going to be rendered? They are going to be rendered here on this template, ng template, which we are creating a template reference variable for, and we are accessing this placeholder from our component using, again, this template reference variable. So again, here you can see that we are accessing that template using that template reference variable, and we are, creating this container ref of our ViewContainerRef, and then we are, kind of accessing that template, and we will insert our instances of the passenger form component using that placeholder. So this is how things are related. Again, I know that this might be a little bit overwhelming. Feel free to rewatch the video to better understand how things are working. So the summary of this episode, we talked about ViewContainerRef. This is like a host container for dynamic components. We talked about ComponentRef, which is a reference to the child component, the component that we want to dynamically create. We've got output and subscribe we use to retrieve data from our child components. And we've got map, which is like a dictionary, right, of keys and values. So for each value, we've got the full name and passport number of a passenger, and the number, which is the key, is the index of that, passenger form. So that was it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. If that's the case, as always, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next episode.